So I'm in second, I'll come round this corner, I'll bury it out of the corner. I'm in a hot hatch for gears, people! Hey guys, and welcome to Petrol Ped. Now, I love a hot hatch, that intoxicating mix of small, nimble, lightweight car, affordable, something you can throw down a B road and just have an absolute riot. And in the last few years, I think Hyundai have been responsible for two of the best hot hatches I've driven, the i20N and its big brother, the i30N. The Kona N's a pretty good car as well. But in these days, as we move towards electrification, there is a question that springs to mind. Is the hot hatch a dying breed? Are we going to have them anymore? Well, the guys at Hyundai's N Division have done something very, very special to the IONIQ 5, and it's parked downstairs in my garage. Come on, let's go and take a look. So here she blows. The Hyundai IONIQ 5N in satin finish performance blue. Honestly, I didn't colour match on purpose. But I guess the first thing we need to say is this car is neither lightweight nor small and nimble. It's a big car, the IONIQ 5. And if you tune into the channel regularly, you will maybe know of the issue I had with my dream garage and the garage doors not being big enough. Well, they have now been modified, they've been widened. There will be a video coming to the channel soon about that. But they are now big enough to get an IONIQ 5 in the garage so I can get it on charge. And that means I can get pretty much any car in here if I can get one of these in, because it's a big old car. Styling wise, I think the IONIQ 5 was an edgy car when it came out, but it's grown into its looks. And what the N Division have done with this car is just make it look even better. And I don't know whether it's just me, but I look at this car and I get Lancia Delta Integrale vibes, which is one of my favourite cars of all time. That angular, kind of boxy wheel arches, squat, mean, aggressive, rally inspired. I get all of that when I look at this car. I love the looks of this car, and it gets an awful lot of attention when you're out and about driving. I think to see it properly, we need to wait till the morning and it's daylight outside and I can take the camera all the way around it, because it's a really cracking car to look at. But before we do that, I can show you a few things, talk about the charging, but I'm also off on my adventures tomorrow. Yet again, getting on a plane, off on another car launch. Yeah, it's safe to say I've done a lot of traveling this year to press events and car launches and other cool activities. I'm very lucky, but it's been a really busy time. But when I am traveling, I get lots of dead time, whether that's sat on a plane or in an airport. Now, sometimes I'll do some editing, but other times I just want to switch off, or actually sometimes I want to do some research about the car I'm going to be seeing. And that's where I use an app on my smartphone called Readly. Now, Readly is an aggregator. It's a subscription service, but once you subscribe to the app, you get access to a whole bunch of magazines and newspaper titles that you can bring down onto that app and consume when you're traveling or when you've got some downtime. The app's available on a smartphone or a tablet, and once you've downloaded it, you can search through all of the different categories. So for me, obviously, cars and motoring, I've got quite a few titles that I've selected there, but you might be into business or sport or craft, whatever it is that your pastime, whatever the fascination that you have, you're bound to be able to find some titles in Readly that you can interact with. Once you've found them, you can create a library. So here's my library. I've got some favourite magazines that I've selected, and what happens is every time a new edition of the magazine comes out, it appears on your Readly app, and you can read the magazine. Now, what Readly will do is it will kind of select specific articles for you if you're just wanting to browse and just wanting to read an article or two, or you can go into the magazine itself and read the whole article. So if I go into Top Gear, I can go into this issue and I can literally go through page by page and read the whole magazine, which is really cool. The nice feature that I find very useful, especially on airplanes, is if I go to a library, you can actually download articles and magazines onto the app so you can watch it or read it offline, which is very, very useful on an aeroplane. Now, if you click on the link in the video description or in the pinned comment, we're able to offer you a 2-month free trial of Readly app. You can cancel at any time, so there's no commitment. And once you've got that subscription in place, you can get access to all the different magazines and newspaper articles. There's loads and loads of stuff to explore. So yeah, my new favorite travel companion is my Readly app on my smartphone, and I will be using that on the plane tomorrow as I fly to Mallorca. Anyway, back to the IONIQ 5N. It's on charge on my 7 kilowatt charger. It's got 47% of charge, and it's still got about 7.5 hours until it's topped up completely. So I think what we'll do is we'll leave it on charge, and then once I get back from my trip and it's daylight outside, we'll have a better look around the car on the outside, and I can run you through some of the details of this very interesting car. As I said before, yes, it's an all-electric car, but it is a real Jekyll and Hyde car because it has some fantastic bits of technology on it. Very, very interesting indeed. Now, it is a few days later and I am safely back from my trip, but what I hadn't anticipated was one of the strongest and most blustery storms I can remember for a long time. So I am battling against the elements. But don't worry, I did the driving bit of this video a few days before my trip and the weather was really nice. So we'll get onto that in a moment. Let's just talk about IONIQ 5. This video is not so much about a review of the IONIQ 5 space and boot and tech. It's all about what the N Division have done to this car, and in particular what they've done to it to make it appeal to a petrol head. Because yes, it's got just over 600 horsepower. Yes, it will do 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds, but there are plenty of EVs out there that'll do that. A Tesla Model Y will do that. But a Tesla Model Y can't come anywhere close to making you feel like this car makes you feel when you drive it, because this car has gears. Well, kind of. So on the rear axle is an electric motor with 383 horsepower. There's also an electronic limited slip diff. On the front axle is a motor with 226 horsepower. So that's a combination of the two of 609 horsepower, but there is a magic button on the steering wheel, which for 10 seconds will give you 650 horsepower. But the really clever thing about this car is it has what Hyundai call the N gear, and what it does is mind-blowing. In software, it manages to manipulate the motors and the drivetrain to deliver the power and torque to replicate gears. You've got flappy paddles on the back of the steering wheel, and you can go up through the gears, and at each change of gear you get a push in the back of your seat, and when you come down through the gears it rev matches, and you can do that in either auto or manual override mode. If you don't change gear when it hits the 8,000 RPM red line, it holds onto the gear and bounces off the limiter. It is a truly spectacular thing, and we need to demonstrate that out on the road, because yes, it's completely fake, but this car drives better than some cars that actually have semi-automatic gearboxes. This car's gearbox is way better than the 4-pot Lotus Emira I had as a long-termer a few months ago. And that's saying something, because this car's electric. Now, there are a few downsides. I talked about hot hatches being lightweight and nimble. This is 2.2 tons, this car, but never mind. Styling-wise, I did promise you some styling looks. Look at it. Just the way that they've worked this car over and above what was already a good-looking car, I think is spot on. Every angle on this car looks cool and aggressive and race car inspired, and I absolutely love it. Can you tell I'm a bit of a fan? Now, it's safe to say Hyundai have done a mega job on the interior of this car. These seats look brilliant, they're very comfortable, the driving position you can get into is really good.
I'll talk a little bit more about it when we're out driving. You do sit quite high in this car. I love this centre console. Some people, I think you might look at this and it's a bit busy, but I like this tray where you put your mobile phone. There are some USB connectors there to charge stuff. You've got a big bay here to put drinks bottles and things. Steering wheel, it's a little bit busy, but that's not a problem because all the buttons that are on here do really exciting and cool things. Again, we'll talk about these when we're out on the road driving. So I had it on Apple CarPlay, that's fine. If I just go to home, so you can, it's quite a nice display to scroll through, but there is an N mode screen, which I think is really cool because it has a whole bunch of displays that you can, N pedal, N race, drift optimizer, there's a lap timer, you've got all of the different customizations. You can customize these buttons on the steering wheel. All I would say, and actually it's very similar to the i30N and i20N, there's almost too much customization in here. I mean, most of these options, you've got 2, 3, or even in some cases 4 different options for the motor, for the steering, for the suspension, for the limited slip diff, for the traction control system, for the head-up display. You know, there's I don't even know what the number of combinations would be. It's thousands probably of ways you could set this car up, which, I don't know, some people are going to geek out over. I just think, for me, I just push the N button and I've got everything turned to the max except for the suspension, which I've backed off and made a little bit softer. But yeah, it's in here's a great place to sit. In the back, there's way more space than you would think. And the boot is a really good, healthy size as well, because as I've mentioned already, this is a big car. Probably need to have a chat about battery and range. It's got an 84 kilowatt hour battery, and the WLTP range is just over 270 miles. However, I think you're looking at maybe 200 to 220 miles in this car, which doesn't sound great. However, it's a 600 plus horsepower car. And if you looked at, I don't know, a V8 or a BMW M car with a straight 6 running 600 horsepower, you're not going to be getting 50 miles to the gallon, are you? You're going to pay a price, and that price is efficiency. So I think a couple of 100 miles on a full charge is probably where you are with this car, but believe me, that couple of 100 miles is going to be smiles per mile like you've never ever had before in an EV. Let's go down the road and I will demonstrate what I mean. First up, I haven't driven a standard IONIQ 5, and I can't believe that's a car that's passed me by. I've driven the IONIQ 6, which is a brilliant car to drive. I'm just not a fan of the looks. This thing looks amazing, and as I've already said, in this frozen performance blue trim, it's just a really, really cool car to look at, and as you drive it around town, you get lots and lots of looks. What's it like to drive? Well, it's a kind of crossover, so although I might refer to it as a hot hatch, it's a bit bigger than that, and it is quite a big car to drive. I parked it in town today and, you know, only just fit in the car park space. It's wide and it's long, so, you know, in the town driving, it is quite a big car, but it loses all of that the second you get it out on the road. Now I'm driving these seats, I can get into a pretty good driving position. I've got them on the floor as low down as I can. I still don't feel like I'm sat in the car. I've got quite a raised elevated position in the car, but visibility is really good. So before we get into any of the special stuff, in terms of normal drive modes, I've got a drive mode button here on the steering wheel. And if I push that, I've got Eco, Normal and Sport. Now, in this test, the time I've got with the car and the type of driving I want to do with the car, I'm not going to explore those too much. But so far, if I look at the long-term trip, I've only had this car a couple of days. The long-term trip at just under 2,400 miles and 75 hours of driving is averaging 2.4 miles per kilowatt hour. I actually think that's quite good for two reasons. Number one, we're coming into the winter here in the UK, so it's a pretty chilly day today. It's 8 degrees, so that's not great for battery efficiency. But also, my hunch is that this car
is driven quite hard by the press teams that get it. I've seen this car, this actual car, on many drag races and track sessions. So actually to average 2.5 miles per kilowatt hour over the last 2,400 miles is pretty good, to be fair. But what the guys in the N division at Hyundai have done is taken an EV and done something very special to it. They've taken an EV and made it so that even a petrol head can love this car. But at the moment I'm driving it around in normal mode as an EV. It's quiet, the road noise isn't too bad, the suspension's dealing with the bumps in the road really nicely. It's just an electric car. It's nothing special in that regard. But let's go and find some of my favourite roads that I normally save for really nice performance cars, drivers' cars. I really wanted to take this car down those roads so I can compare and contrast an EV against some of the best drivers' cars I've had on the channel. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is push the right hand end button, and I've now got noise. This isn't some noise to make it sound like a spaceship or haven't worked with some famous composer. No, the guys at N have basically made a noise that sounds like a hot hatch, which is cool. Next thing I'm going to do is push the left hand button, and I've set a custom N mode, which basically has everything dialed up to the max, apart from the suspension, which I've dialed right back to its softest setting. And then I've got paddles behind the steering wheel, and I'm changing down gear. Ready for this? Ready? I mean, I've suddenly got an EV with a gearbox. And the amazing thing is, it's not just an auditory thing. When I pull up to change up gear, I can just feel a little movement in the drivetrain. Down into third, tip it in, on the power. It feels like I'm driving a car with gears. And I honestly have no idea how they're doing it. So I'm in second, I'll come round this corner, I'll bury it out of the corner. I'm in a hot hatch for gears, people, but it's got an electric motor. Well, it's got 2 electric motors actually. And what that does to the driving experience, you can probably tell from the look on my face, it transforms this car. And even the most die-hard anti-EV petrol head that you could possibly think of to drive this car and not be impressed with how it drives. It's incredible because it has a real Jekyll and Hyde character. Before I was driving it in normal mode, no noise, it was an EV. Now it's a hot hatch, and it gives me levels of driver engagement like no other car, no other EV I've driven. And I've driven some performance EVs before on the brakes, really good brakes actually. Down into second, hopefully I'll get a good run up the petrol head into first. It's just unreal. It's witchcraft. And then that coupled to, it's pushing me in the back, coupled to the fact that this car has over 600 horsepower. It's got very, very good manners. Now, I'm not going to get to test this car on track, sadly, because it's got a drift optimizer and all kinds of clever things. I'm holding it in third as I go up this hill, and it feels just, grab fourth, come in here, down is third. I'm in an EV. I've waited to drive this car since I first saw it launch, and I've spoken to so many of my peers that have driven the car that have been blown away by it. This car, it's incredible. Now, up until this point, I had driven some
some performance EVs. I'm going to just look, it's holding it in fourth there. I've driven some performance EVs. I went out to Japan to drive the Nissan Ariya Nismo. Those guys kind of said that this car was one of the targets. They're both crossover vehicles. I'll tell you now, sorry Nissan and Nismo, this car is night and day better than that car. Not just from a pure grunt point of view, it's got a couple of 100 horsepower more, but this gear thing, it just fundamentally transforms the way the car is to drive. And then you drive something like the Alpine A290, which is a much smaller hatch variant, obviously it's only 220 horsepower, and it's a brilliant little car on track, very chuckable round a B road and on track, beautiful driving characteristics, a real driver's car, but it's still an EV. It still has the EV instant torque and EV drivetrain, and although there is a noise, the noise is an EV noise. The Alpha Junior, I drove that on track this year and was massively impressed by the way that handled. One of the few electric cars with a mechanical limited slip diff, and you can really feel it. And it's a real driver's car on a track, but it's still an EV. This, obviously this is an EV, but in that instant where I change it down to second, it doesn't feel like any EV I've driven before. It's just bloody brilliant. Okay, I think we should try launch control. Oh well. Oh. There, launch control works. Excellent, good. Right, next, let's put the noise back on because it's cool. The next thing I want to try out is the NGB button. This car is fast anyway with its standard horsepower. I push that little red button on my steering wheel and for 10 seconds I get 650 horsepower. Oh, now, when you activate that, I mean, it's more like you'd use it for, oh my days, this car's rapid, Jesus. It's more like you would activate that for an overtake. It turns the gears off, it turns the noise off, and you've just got 10 seconds of maximum attack. It's like having, you know, nitrous injection just there ready for you when you want to go past something. So, this is it. Manufacturers, car manufacturers out there, the quest in the EV world for 0 to 60 times in under 3 seconds, for over 1,000 horsepower, for ridiculous amounts of torque is all very well and good, but in the real world, it is pointless. You could argue this car having over 600 horsepower is too much, but this play on the car, and you may well sit there and go, it's just a gimmick, and that's fine. You're probably not a petrol head, and you're probably not the kind of person this is aimed at. But if you're a petrol head who loves driving, loves that engagement with a car, changing gears and feeling at one with things and just coming down into a corner and knocking down a couple of gears, and if you're that person, EVs just you really struggle with them, because that's not the driving engagement and driving pleasure you get when you drive an EV. You get that single gear, in some cars multiple gear. You might go like a Porsche has 2 gears, but you only really feel that on when you pull away. This, it ticks all of your petrol head boxes, down into third, down into second. And the really cool thing is, I'll try and demonstrate it now in second maybe. So we're going second. It holds it on the limiter. It even holds the car on the limiter. If you don't, so when you're going up through the gears, if you hang on to it too long, it redlines at 8,000 RPM, by the way. God knows how they work that one out. But it will hold it on the limiter, and if you're coming down too aggressively and try and pull a downshift too early, it won't let you, just like a real car. It's brilliant. I mean, this is if legacy car manufacturers want people to buy EVs, this is the kind of stuff that they need to be doing. not just chucking horsepower and torque at it. This is innovative and clever, and I have no idea how it works. They must have basically sent the N design team to Hogwarts for a couple of years, because they've come back with witchcraft, I tell thee. It is spectacularly good. This is by far and away the best car I've driven this year. And all of the hype that you hear people talking and praising on this car, all of it is completely and utterly justified, because it is absolutely brilliant! Let me know what you think of the IONIQ 5N. I now need to go and have a look and seriously think about buying one, because they are that good. And we'll see you on the next film. If you enjoyed that, give me a thumbs up. Comments below are always welcome. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to Petrol Ped for plenty more content to come. And I'll see you on the next film. You take care, guys. Drive safe. Now, 4th, 3rd, 2nd. Bury it!